The morning sun of General Santos City pierced through the cracks of simple wooden and zinc houses where dozens of Filipino families began another day hoping to earn enough to survive. Among these modest homes, in one of the narrowest alleys of the neighborhood, lived Isagani Tolentino, a 42-year-old man whose calloused hands told the story of a lifetime dedicated to manual labor. His eyes, though marked by fatigue, held a kindness that even the most difficult years couldn't erase. Isagani woke up every day at 4 in the morning, not because he had a steady job waiting for him, but because he knew that work opportunities at the port docks appeared early and disappeared quickly. He walked through the still dark streets of the city, carrying on his back the same worn backpack he had used for more than 15 years, containing only a water bottle and a small lunch that his wife, Marilu, prepared with the few ingredients they had at home. Isagani's routine was always the same: arrive early at the port, stand in line with other men in the same situation, wait for some foreman to choose workers to load or unload ships, and hope to be one of the lucky ones of the day. On good days, he managed to work 8 straight hours moving rice sacks, boxes of imported goods, or heavy equipment. On bad days, he returned home empty-handed, carrying only the silent promise to try again the next day. What made Isagani special wasn't his physical strength, although he was respected by his companions for being able to carry loads that younger men considered impossible. What truly set him apart was his inexplicable generosity, even in the face of his own need. When he managed to get well-paying work, Isagani always saved a small portion of the money in a separate envelope, which he secretly called his kindness fund, intended to help neighbors who were going through even harder times than his own. That specific morning, while walking through the familiar streets toward the port, Isagani had no idea that his life was about to take a completely unexpected turn. He didn't know that a decision made decades ago, when he was just a 10-year-old boy sharing his lunch with an even poorer friend, was about to return in a way that would change not only his reality, but also that of his entire family. 32 years ago, on the same streets where Isagani now walked as an adult, 2 10-year-old boys faced hunger in a way that only children in extreme vulnerability could understand. Isagani, even at that age, already showed the same generosity that would accompany him throughout his life. He shared what little he had with Emmanuel, a boy even thinner than himself, whose parents had left the city in search of work, leaving him in the care of an elderly grandmother who could barely support herself. The 2 boys had become inseparable not by choice, but by mutual necessity. Isagani had a family that, despite being poor, still managed to put at least 1 meal on the table every day. Emmanuel, on the other hand, went entire days without eating, depending on the kindness of neighbors or the luck of finding some informal work suitable for his age. Their friendship was born the day Isagani saw Emmanuel collapsed from hunger on a street corner and decided without hesitation to share his school lunch. This daily sharing of food became a sacred ritual between the 2 boys. Isagani would come from school, meet Emmanuel at their agreed spot, usually under a large mango tree in the city center, and meticulously divide everything he had: rice, a piece of fish when available, some vegetables, and always a bit of fresh water. Emmanuel never asked for this help, and Isagani never made it seem like a favor. For them, it was simply what friends did for each other. The dreams of both boys were simple, but seemed unattainable given their reality. Emmanuel constantly talked about becoming a great fighter, inspired by boxing matches they occasionally managed to watch on an old television at some commercial establishment. He would practice punches in the air, imagining himself in a ring, defending the pride of the Philippines against opponents from around the world. Isagani, more pragmatic, dreamed of owning his own house and having steady work that would allow him to support a family without going through the hardships he saw his parents face daily. Time passed, and life circumstances separated the 2 friends abruptly. Emmanuel's grandmother died when he was 12 years old, and the boy disappeared from the city without a trace, probably searching for distant relatives or opportunities in Manila. Isagani never heard from his friend again, but always kept those moments of mutual generosity in his memory, not knowing that those seemingly small acts were planting seeds that would bear fruit decades later in an extraordinary way. Isagani's life at 42 was a predictable succession of small victories and great challenges. Married for 18 years to Marilu, a big-hearted woman who worked as a washerwoman for middle-class families in the city, they had built a partnership based on mutual understanding that they needed to fight together to survive. They had 2 children, Carmina, 16, an intelligent young woman who dreamed of studying nursing but often had to miss classes to help her mother with work, and Joaquin, 12, a smart boy who showed natural talent for fixing electronic equipment. The Tolentino family's house was a reflection of their lives, simple, clean and organized, but marked by constant financial limitations. Built with cheap materials over the years, it had 2 small bedrooms, a living room that also served as a kitchen, and an external bathroom shared with neighbors. The walls were decorated with some family photos and religious images that Marilu collected, creating a welcoming environment despite material difficulties. Every day, Isagani left home before dawn and returned at the end of the afternoon, often exhausted from intense physical work. When he managed to work, he came home with stories about the ships he had helped unload, interesting products he had seen arriving from other countries, or co-workers he had met. When he couldn't find work, he arrived in silence. But Marilu always received him with a smile and a word of encouragement, reminding him that the next day would bring new opportunities. Isagani's neighbors knew him as a man of his word, someone they could trust when they needed help carrying heavy furniture, fixing a leaking roof, or simply venting about life's problems. He never charged for these favors, considering them a natural part of community life. When any neighbor went through greater difficulties, illness in the family, job loss or documentation problems, Isagani always found a way to help, even if it meant tightening his own budget even more. What Isagani didn't know was that his reputation for kindness had spread beyond the borders of his neighborhood. People he had helped over the years talked about him to others, creating a silent network of recognition and gratitude. Stories about the port worker who always found time to help others, even while facing his own difficulties, circulated through the city in ways he could never imagine, preparing the ground for an encounter that would change his life forever. It was a typical Tuesday in March when Isagani woke up with the feeling that something different was about to happen. There was no logical reason for this feeling. The sky was the same cloudy gray as always. The work at the port followed the same daily uncertainty, and his family's financial problems remained the same. But as he prepared for another day of searching for work, Isagani felt a different energy in the air, as if the universe was preparing for a surprise. At the port T, the movement was more intense than usual. Several ships had arrived during the early morning hours, bringing varied cargo that needed to be unloaded quickly. Isagani got work in the first hours of the morning, being chosen to join a team responsible for unloading containers from a Chinese cargo ship. The work was heavy, but he was used to it, and the prospect of a full day's work made him excited thinking about the money he would take home. During the lunch break, while eating the simple sandwich that Marilu had prepared, Isagani noticed an unusual commotion near the port's administrative office. Several well-dressed people were moving around the area, accompanied by security guards and carrying equipment that looked like filming gear. Some of the older workers commented that it was probably some report about port operations, something that happened occasionally when government authorities visited the facilities. What caught Isagani's attention wasn't the presence of cameras or important people, but rather a medium-height man who stood out from the main group. He wore simple clothes, a white polo shirt and jeans, and walked with a naturalness that contrasted with the formality of the other visitors. There was something familiar about that face, that way of walking, that manner of observing the people around him with genuine interest and respect. When the man approached the group of workers during the break, greeting each one individually and asking about their lives and families, Isagani felt his heart race. The voice, the smile, the gentle way of treating people that most important visitors didn't even notice. All of this awakened a deep memory that had remained dormant for more than 3 decades. His eyes filled with tears when he finally recognized who was standing before him. Emmanuel, the hungry boy with whom he had shared so many meals decades ago, now transformed into Manny Pacquiao, the pride of the Philippines. Manny Pacquiao stopped in front of Isagani, and for a few seconds the two men observed each other in silence, as if time had stopped around them. The other workers continued their conversations and lunches, oblivious to the extraordinary moment happening right there, in the middle of the noisy port of General Santos City. For Manny, that face marked by work and years brought back memories of a time when hunger was a constant companion, and the kindness of a boy had meant the difference between surviving and giving up. The world boxing champion approached slowly, his eyes filling with emotion as he confirmed what his heart had already recognized. There was Isagani, the boy who had shared his food every day without ever expecting anything in return, the friend who had shown that even in the most difficult circumstances, it was possible to maintain generosity and compassion. Decades of success, fame, and worldwide recognition seemed to disappear in that moment. And Manny became Emmanuel again, the hungry boy who had learned about kindness through the example of a true friend. Isagani dropped the sandwich he was eating, his hands trembling as he processed the reality of what was happening. Little Emmanuel, who had disappeared from his life when they were 12 years old, was now before him as one of the most famous and respected people in the Philippines. But more than that, he was there as the same gentle and humble human being that Isagani remembered from childhood, someone who, despite all the glory achieved, still looked at a port worker with the same respect and affection as always. The other workers gradually realized that something special was happening when they saw Manny Pacquiao approach Isagani even closer, placing his hands on his childhood friend's shoulders with a familiarity that surprised everyone. The filming crew, initially focused on capturing general images of the port, redirected their cameras to that spontaneous encounter, not knowing exactly what was happening, but realizing they were witnessing something genuinely moving. The moment of mutual recognition was intense and silent, charged with decades of unspoken longing and gratitude. Manny perfectly remembered the days when he would arrive at their meeting point under the mango tree, weak from hunger, and find Isagani always there, with his lunchbox open and a welcoming smile. Isagani remembered the determination in his friend's eyes when he talked about his dreams of becoming a great fighter, dreams that at the time seemed impossible for two poor boys from General Santos, but which now proved prophetic in an extraordinary way. Manny asked for the cameras to stop filming for a few minutes, wanting to have a private moment to talk with his childhood friend before turning that encounter into something public. He sat next to Isagani on an improvised bench made of wooden planks, completely ignoring the security protocol that usually surrounded his public appearances. For him, at that moment, nothing was more important than reconnecting with the person who had planted in his heart the seeds of compassion and generosity that had accompanied him throughout his entire journey to success. With a voice choked with emotion, Manny began to recall the difficult days of childhood, when the food shared by Isagani not only satisfied his physical hunger, but also nourished his hope that there were good people in the world. He told how, during the hardest years of training, when he was still an unknown teenager fighting in precarious gyms in Manila, he always remembered the lesson of generosity he had learned under that mango tree. This memory had inspired him to never forget his origins and to always help others who were going through the same difficulties he had faced. Isagani listened in silence, still processing the surreal reality of talking to Manny Pacquiao as if it were a normal conversation between two old friends. He felt a mixture of immense pride and deep humility, realizing that his small acts of kindness from decades ago had somehow contributed to shaping the character of someone who had become a national hero. At the same time, he felt embarrassed by the disparity between their current lives. While Manny had conquered the world, he continued struggling to find work at the port every day. Manny, sensing his friend's discomfort, quickly explained that material success had never erased from his memory the importance of those childhood moments. He spoke about how, in every important victory of his career, he remembered the people who had been kind to him when he was just Emmanuel, a nameless boy without prospects. Isagani had been the first person to teach him that true wealth lay in the ability to share the little one has with those who need even more, a lesson that had guided all his philanthropic actions over the years. The conversation between the two men was interrupted by the other workers, who gradually approached to greet Manny, but always respecting the special moment that was happening between the two friends. It was evident to everyone that this was not just a casual encounter between a celebrity and a fan, but rather a deeply meaningful reunion between two people whose lives had been connected in a special way decades ago, and who now found each other again through the work of destiny. Forma contribuído para a formação do caráter de alguém que se tornara um herói nacional. Ao mesmo tempo, sentia-se constrangido com a disparidade entre suas vidas atuais. Enquanto Manny havia conquistado o mundo, ele continuava lutando para conseguir trabalho no porto todos os dias. Manny, percebendo o desconforto do amigo, rapidamente explicou que o sucesso material nunca havia apagado de sua memória a importância daqueles momentos de infância. Ele falou sobre como, em cada vitória importante de sua carreira, se lembrava das pessoas que haviam sido gentis com ele quando era apenas Emanuel, um menino sem nome e sem perspectivas. Isagani havia sido a primeira pessoa a lhe ensinar que a verdadeira riqueza estava na capacidade de dividir o pouco que se tem com quem precisa ainda mais. Uma lição que havia orientado todas as suas ações filantrópicas ao longo dos anos. A conversa entre os dois homens foi interrompida pelos outros trabalhadores, que gradualmente se aproximaram para cumprimentar Manny, mas sempre respeitando o momento especial que estava acontecendo entre os dois amigos. Era evidente para todos que aquele não era apenas um encontro casual entre uma celebridade e um fã, mas sim um reencontro profundamente significativo entre duas pessoas cujas vidas haviam sido conectadas de forma especial décadas atrás e que agora se encontravam novamente por obra do destino. After almost an hour of conversation, during which Manny and Isagani recovered 3 decades of lost stories, the world champion made a request that left everyone around completely surprised. He asked if Isagani could skip work that day to accompany him on a visit to the city, as there was something very important he would like to share with his childhood friend. Isagani hesitated, worried about the money he would lose by not working, but Manny insisted, guaranteeing that that day would be more important than any amount he could earn at the port. The first destination was the Tolentino family's house, where Manny was received by Marilu and Isagani's children with a mixture of disbelief and joy. The presence of the national idol in their humble residence seemed like a dream, but the natural and respectful way Manny treated the entire family quickly put them at ease. He talked extensively with Carmina about her dreams of studying nursing and was impressed by the young woman's intelligence and determination. With Joaquin, he discovered the boy's talent for electronics and encouraged him to pursue this interest as a possible future career. During the visit, Manny discreetly observed the house's conditions, noting the walls that needed repair, the roof that leaked in some spots, and the simple but well-cared-for furniture that reflected the family's pride despite financial limitations. He also noticed small details that revealed Isagani's character. Photographs of neighbors and friends scattered throughout the house, evidence that this was a family that valued relationships above material possessions, and small objects that indicated the gestures of generosity that Isagani continued to make even in his own difficulties. After the family visit, Manny took Isagani on a tour of the city, visiting places that had marked their childhood. They went to the mango tree where they used to meet, now much larger and more leafy, but still in the same place as always. There, sitting under the familiar shade, Manny revealed the true reason for his visit to General Santos that day. He had returned specifically to look for Isagani, after years of trying to locate him through acquaintances and private investigators. The champion explained that he had spent decades wanting to find the friend who had been so important in his formation, not just to thank him, but to somehow reciprocate the generosity he had received when he needed it most. He told how whenever he faced difficult decisions in his career, he would ask himself what Isagani would do in the same situation, using the lessons of kindness and humility he had learned in childhood as a guide for his own choices. That encounter was not a coincidence, but rather the result of a determined search to find someone who had fundamentally shaped his life. The day after the reunion, Manny Pacquiao organized a simple but meaningful ceremony at the General Santos Community Center, inviting all of Isagani's neighborhood to witness a moment that would become legendary in the city. Before hundreds of people, including local authorities, media representatives, and curious residents, Manny publicly told the story of his friendship with Isagani, explaining how the generous acts of a 10-year-old boy had planted seeds that flourished throughout his entire career. With tears in his eyes, Manny announced that he had established an educational fund that would guarantee Carmina could study nursing at the best university in the Philippines, with all expenses paid and a monthly allowance so she could dedicate herself entirely to her studies. For Joaquin, he organized a mentorship program with technology specialists, in addition to providing all the equipment and courses necessary for the young man to develop his talents in electronics and engineering. For Isagani and Marilu, the surprise was even greater. Manny had bought and completely renovated a house in the same neighborhood where the family had always lived, keeping them close to their community, but providing them with the comfort and security they deserved. The new house had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a small garden where Marilu could cultivate the plants she had always dreamed of having. Furthermore, Manny arranged for Isagani to become coordinator of a community program that would help other port workers in difficult situations, guaranteeing him a dignified salary for doing what he had always done naturally, helping other people. But perhaps the most touching gesture was the creation of a small plaza where the old mango tree used to be, transforming that space into a permanent symbol of the importance of generosity and true friendship. A simple plaque was installed at the site, reading "In memory of all acts of kindness that transform lives," without mentioning specific names, but creating a place where community people could remember that small gestures can have extraordinary consequences. The story of Isagani and Manny spread quickly throughout the Philippines and the world, inspiring thousands of people to reflect on the importance of compassion and generosity in their own lives. Isagani, now with a materially comfortable life, continued to be the same humble and generous person as always, using his new position to help even more people in his community. He always told visitors who came to learn about his story that the real miracle had not been the reunion with Manny, but rather having learned from childhood that true happiness comes from the ability to share what we have with those who need it, regardless of how little that little may be. The friendship between the 2 men remained strong, based not on gratitude or obligation, but on mutual recognition that they had found in each other proof that genuine kindness always finds a way to return, transforming not only the life of those who receive it, but especially the life of those who give it.
Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.